We were in the apple orchards of France, which was a terrible situation because of the oh dear, I forget the word for them. The French used to partition off all of their acreage with these very thick hedgerows bounding their property. And it was perfect territory for a defender, but terrible territory for an attacker, because you couldn't get a tank through them, and you know.
And you were with an anti-tank company, right?
Right. And some sergeant somewhere in the service invented this sort of a bulldozer plow type thing that was welded to the front of tanks, and it allowed them to bash right through the hedgerows. I hope he got a medal for it, because that turned the whole thing around. In other words, no longer did the Germans have that advantage of, ambush.
That's one of the things that never quite came across in all the World War II movies, how in many ways, not psychologically, but technically and technologically unprepared the Americans were.
And our ego. The British had a flail tanks, which rotated huge chains on the front of the tank. And when they drive those across an area where the Germans had planted mines, they would explode the mines, not damaging anything, and then the troops would follow, therefore. And the British asked the Americans if they would like something. No, we don't need those. And there's a lot of stupidity like that,
And a lot of personal initiative.
Yeah. I guess one of the superior weapons in World War II was the Jeep, which gave them mobility, and also the, what you call a DKW Duck, which was essentially a 2.5-ton truck rigged out to be amphibious, had a propeller on the back, which you could run when you weren't under wheel power, and they would come right ashore with supplies and men off the LCIs and land right on the beach and keep going.
Why do you think the Allies won the war?
Because of the Russians. Let's face it, the Russians did the most damage. You know, the Russians dropped more bombs on Germany than the Americans and the British combined. And also, they lost, 1 million men fighting the Germans, but they also wiped out the German army to the east, which were, at that time, the best, most experienced, best equipped troops. And we were facing, to a large degree, also, great units, panzer units, but there were also a lot of home guard types, And they were pretty well tired out by the time we got to them. I mean, I'm not excusing the capability of the Americans and the British, because they were some very good ones, In many ways, I think the German equipment was better than ours. We had more of it. I mean, we'd turn out a mediocre tank like a Ford motor car, and they'd turn out a tank, the Germans, like a Rolls Royce. And the argument was made, their tanks are better, but we got more of them. But they didn't explain that. Someone said that we can afford to lose 5 tanks to knock out one of theirs, never realizing that they were talking about the crews in 5 tanks that would be knocked, wiped out, killed, Americans killed, to get that one German tank.
A lot of waste.
Terrible. Patton gave a pep talk to the troops before we attacked Metz. And his figure of speech was, I don't care if I load up a 2.5-ton truck with dog tags. We're going to take Metz. And that's when everybody started grumbling, mumbling, you know, our blood and guts and his medals or whatever. You know.
And his glory.
Yeah. He was not that popular among the troops. So, anywho. Oh, and in Eisenhower's memoirs, Eisenhower said, it was really, we could have bypassed Metz. There was no, but George wanted to be the first general in history to capture Metz. So we let him take it.
At a price of how many men?
Probably 10 or 12,000 men on total.
Tell me about the night you were driving that truck through, I think you were still in France.
Well, that was the night that we would have got blown up.
Yes.
That was the night that Roosevelt was died. And we were coming down this road in the truck, hauling our 57 millimeter anti-tank gun, and I was in the passenger seat, in effect. And a German 88 shell came in and landed not too far to our left. And then another one came not too far from our right. And I said, everybody out into the ditch. And the next one landed dead center on the truck. In other words, the Germans had been zeroing in. And they had an observer somewhere who was telling them where to direct the shells. So up went the truck with all of my worldly belongings, such as they were. So that was that. And we spent the rest of the night in a cellar.
Do you recall where you were on VE Day?
Not too sure. Obviously in Germany. Some small village somewhere. I was in Paderborn for a while. I don't know, yeah, maybe it was Paderborn. It ended. But then we were, wherever we were, it was a very tiny town. We were military government automatically. Because, you know, who's going to supervise all the Germans? And every German in town would come up to you on the QT and point at something and say, he's a big Nazi. And later on, that guy'd come to you and point at the other guy and say, he's a big Nazi. Everybody was a big Nazi, you know.
And everybody in France.
And everybody probably was.
Yeah.
Our technique was simple. We'd look for the biggest, nicest house in town until we give them 2 hours to move out and leave all their belongings except, you know.
Right.
That evidenced authority and respect. That we won, we get the best. Anywho.
And you never thought about staying in the service?
Oh, good God, no. Whatever for. A few guys who signed up for the reserves, they give you a big pitch when you're demoted or demobbed. Once you sign up for the reserves, the patriotic thing to do, and you only bet. No way. I mean, I don't need to be disciplined that much. The poor devils who did went up and froze to death in Korea, 1950, you know.
So one war was enough for you?
Oh, yeah. They're fun if you don't get hurt. I mean, adult cowboys and Indians. God, this does everything that great big thing does in the
Uh-huh.
Jeepers.